MIQ podcast on digital transformation, powered by Marlabs.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webcast about SAP Testing. I am Siva Prasanna Vanapalli, Head of Quality Engineering and DevOps Practice at Marlabs. I'm joined by Bill Hayden, Solution Architect at Tricentis. Today, together, we'll be talking about the current state of SAP testing and how model-based testing has been helping hand in hand with SAP. And we also have a webinar coming up on November 11th to talk in detail on the same topic. If you have not already registered, please do register. Over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Siva. And thank you for having me on this podcast today, by the way. As you mentioned, I am Senior Solution Architect for Tricentis, primarily focused in our Alliance group. But I've had the good fortune of seeing firsthand how automated quality assurance has evolved and matured over the past 20 plus years. I can still remember the day I first fell in love with automation. I managed to do a script that took me 2 weeks and automated 2.5 months worth of work, and I won an award for the most productivity in my lab. From that moment on, I was hooked. But what we've really seen recently in the industry is a really exciting evolution of model-based test automation. I'm excited to talk about it today. Now, considering the expertise that Marlabs has in SAP and SAP testing, what I'm curious to know, what challenges are you seeing in recent trends with your customers?
Sure, Bill. Definitely. I would like to bring a couple pointers there. One in a general trend per se, when it comes to the QA world and the testing world, there's a lot of buzz around the digital cloud DevOps. So there's a lot of emphasis on the speed and agility that one has to bring in from QA point of view, and SAP is no exception for it, right? So there's a lot of emphasis around continuous testing and different ways to do, on how best we can, bring in acceleration into our testing and all that. So with all that said, coming into SAP world, there are a lot of HANA migrations that we all know. And there is also a trend of higher customization of SAP instances compared to what it used to be in the past. With all those, digital, these customizations, migrations would actually put a lot of, pressure on the QA teams in terms of delivering a lot in the shorter time, right? So the teams has to focus on end-to-end testing. They have to do the regressions with Agile being in multiple, cycles of, sprints of testing needs to be done. So there's a lot of emphasis that needs to be brought in terms of not only focusing on the current trends, but also the overall end-to-end testing and the regression that has to be dealt with. So I would say it's very impossible to do this in a traditional way and the manual testing fashion if you were to really align ourselves to the digital and the continuous testing type of fashion. So the only key is automation, and automation doing it consistently, and also bringing automation as early as possible in all phases of testing. So I think that's been a key trend. Having said that, I would like to ask you, Tricentis being a leader in this space, especially in the digital, agile, and the continuous testing space, what have you seen and what are you seeing when it comes to SAP testing? And how do you think various products that you have from Tosca would actually help accelerate a lot of this testing? And how customized are they to SAP?
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. Yes. You well know, even the smallest change in an SAP system can cause a business disruption that could conceivably bring business to a halt. There's zero tolerance for downtime. So when we are implementing change, we have to tread carefully, and that means we should be extra vigilant in our testing. But as you also pointed out, the increased need for automation due to the rate of changes that are coming at us is becoming greater every day. So really, when the change occurs in the system, there's 3 questions we need to answer. First of all, what do we need to test? We need to be able to do that in an intelligent way based on what's impacted and based on risk. Once the change is implemented, we need to understand not only does that new feature or functionality work, but has it negatively impacted any existing feature or functionality? And last but not least, of course, does it scale? With the multiple ways to consume SAP and their ever-evolving interfaces, mobile interfaces to iPads to set devices within factories and the Internet of Things, this is becoming a greater and greater problem from a volume perspective. Now, SAP Test Automation from Tricentis addresses each of these questions, and really under the theme that our founder Wolfgang Platz likes to speak about consistently, a continuous testing process, a continuous testing culture, if you will, that's going to drive faster, safer, and ultimately lower cost SAP releases. So let's take a step back and address those questions. Let's start with what to test. Tricentis Live Compare actually uses an AI-powered change impact analysis engine that will analyze the hot pack and what has changed on the system, cross-correlate that against real production data, see users and using which features the most often, rate those changes and those impacted objects by risk, and then be able to interface with your test management system and intelligently tell, okay, this is what needs to be tested in this priority and this order. You already have test cases for 40% of that, but 60% of these objects that are changing require new tests to be developed. And the system will outline exactly where you need to focus both your creation and your execution efforts. That goes straight into our automated system, Tricentis Tosca, which can automate a full end-to-end regression test, not just across SAP, but against non-SAP systems. As we all know, SAP interfaces with a multitude of systems, and often when we're scoping testing efforts, we're looking at those interface points to come up with the entire scale of the project. What Tosca offers is a consistent end-user experience, whether you're automating SAP, maybe Salesforce, maybe a custom in-house application, and also lowers the barrier to entry by model-based test automation, which I'll talk about in a moment. Now, we also addressed, does the system scale? Tricentis Flood can provide on-demand load testing for all browser and mobile-based SAP applications, and that includes Fiori, SAP Cloud Platform, and SAP S/4HANA as well. Now, one of the problems we're constantly facing is, do we have a stable environment? When can we start testing? When can we start automating? And that's one of the ways model-based test automation really helps accelerate the process. Now, what do we mean by that? Rather than build a script, and as we all know, automation historically has been based on a variety of scripting or programming languages requiring a certain level of technical expertise. But rather than build the script, let's build a representative model of the system, screen by screen, that can then be used in a plug-and-play fashion to build our tests. There's no scripting language to learn, no programming language to learn, and in that way, business users who really have the knowledge of how the SAP system operates and what the flows are can contribute to the automation process. And as you can imagine, this also lowers the maintenance time as well. Therefore, after an SAP project goes live, more automation will be in place. It'll be built based on a risk-related analysis. And this could conceivably drive down the need for hypercare, as we all know, very expensive to fix problems if we're catching them earlier in the process. Live Compare really is the key to this up front because we can reduce risk by more than 90%. And if we do achieve that, then hypercare truly does become redundant. Now, we talked about speed. And in this ever-changing DevOps world, it's about delivering software at a faster and faster pace. And commercial off-the-shelf applications like SAP are not immune to this. I saw one report the other day, there's 56 different changes coming for SAP before the end of the year. How do we keep up with that blinding pace of speed? Because SAP is expecting their customers to keep up. Traditional testing methods just aren't going to cut it. They worked well enough when we had annual changes, but not fast enough to handle today's accelerated cycles. Customers are falling further and further behind without these processes and techniques. So a combination of our Live Compare product, our Tosca product, our Flood product, and more importantly, the culture of change they engender from annual release checkpoints to a continuous testing mindset and platform will help organizations transform for speed, for reliability, so they can safely and swiftly apply support packs and other updates.
This is MIQ, Tracking Digital Transformations with Marlabs.
Thank you, Bill. That's a very detailed response, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners would love to have a deep dive on this. Having said that, could you explain how you think the model-based testing would actually cover, aspects around API testing, the data aspects, especially those becoming very relevant with the modern architectures and with HANA and everything else coming into mixture? Do you have a few thoughts around those?
Oh, excellent question. Excellent point. We already talked about how model-based test automation lowers the barrier for entry. It allows people who don't necessarily know how to script or program to contribute in a meaningful way to the automation process. And as a side effect, also helps to really cut down on the time it takes to maintain your automated test suite because there's single points of maintenance. We're not having to look at an entire framework and make mass adjustments. As an old mentor of mine once said, if you're spending more time maintaining your automated test suite than you are actually running it, you've kind of defeated the purpose of automation. And model-based test automation really makes that a reality. But as you mentioned, we can extend that same paradigm from UI to API, as well as data integrity testing, and give people a consistent user experience through models. So just imagine, you're scanning a UI, you're building a model, then you can scan the API and build models for the web services calls and response in a very non-technical manner that you can then data drive. Now, why this drive towards API testing? I have seen it in multiple customer sites. Primarily, APIs don't change nearly as much as UIs. Therefore, the tests you build aren't nearly as fragile to changes in the overall system. And sheer speed of execution. You can run so many more data combinations intelligently at the API level than you can at the UI level. One example, I have a customer in Florida that on every code check-in, 1,607 test cases immediately kick off and give the developer feedback within 17 minutes. That's truly the meaning of CI, and that's where API level automation really plays a role. So by demystifying, if you will, API through model-based test automation, again, lowering the barrier, accelerating the ability to adopt these new characteristics. And we mentioned data integrity testing. What if we could take that burden of data migration from a legacy SAP system to a new S/4HANA system and all the validation checks that have to be required? What if we could take that burden off the employees and fully automate it? I saw one study that said some people involved spend fully 1/3 of their time daily just making sure that the data is intact. Because with our new analytics-based marketing and sales approaches that are sweeping all industries, powered by machine learning, if our data that machine learning isn't exact, then we're going to misdirect our marketing and sales efforts as an organization. So data integrity testing becomes paramount. And to automate that again with a model-based test approach speeds up the process, allows the people with the true business knowledge around that data to get involved, and minimizes time for maintenance. So we've talked a lot about model-based test automation. Let's talk about 3 key benefits, because everything good comes in threes. So build and maintain resilient tests. Resiliency means can stand up against change without having to be constantly maintained. What if at the UI, API, and data integrity level, we had a Lego-like building block library where we could combine flows, reuse created tests, and if the application changes, we have a single point of maintenance just by updating the model in all 3 layers. And as you know, in all the SAP migrations, it's a phased approach. We might start with just data integrity testing and then move to API testing as things transition, and then ultimately to UI testing. So, second point, jumpstart your test automation through the intelligent scanners that we have, our recorders, which I might add on the exploratory testing side, James Bach himself has been involved in the evolution and creation of some of these, personal hero of mine. We can build these with far less technical requirements and involve more and more people on the QA and business side, and the ease of maintenance. if you have 56 changes coming before the end of the year, don't you need a test suite that's going to be simple and easy and quickly changed? We're going to have dynamic object values. That can corrupt a modern framework. We're going to have UIs completely rearranging. But through Tosca, we have unique identifiers that make it consistent. Tosca will literally work across 160 different UI technologies. And with our new AI-based image recognition in Tosca 13.4, there's literally not a UI that it cannot handle. So that leads to our third point, achieving the mentality and culture of continuous testing with an easily maintained suite that runs for every change, that runs intelligently based on what objects change and the risk imposed by those object changes. And just to tie it all back, will it scale? Because Flood incorporates a lot of these same concepts as well. So this no-code approach, as we like to call it, will help create and maintain the automation as fast as these changes are coming at us.
Thank you, Bill. That's a very detailed response. And I'm sure, between Marlabs and Tricentis, we could bring a lot together in our upcoming webinar on November 11th. So thank you all for joining today. And please, if you have not already registered, please register. And the link to it is next to the podcast link that you have here. Thank you. Have a great day.
MIQ Podcast on Digital Transformation, powered by Marlabs.